So, with Fantastic Four First Steps on the Horizon have been released in theatres, I thought that we could do a deep dive into the previous Fantastic Four movies. So, without further ado, let's begin with Fantastic Four 2005. So, Fantastic Four is a movie released in 2005 starring Ian Grufford, Jessica Alba, Chris Evans, Michael Chiklis, and directed by Tim Story. So, this movie begins with Reed Richards and Ben Grimm approaching Victor Von Doom in order to conduct an experiment on radiation in space. Victor Von Doom agrees. He goes up there with them alongside Sue Storm and Johnny Storm as well. And the five of them get hit by the cloud whilst up in space, and that ultimately gives them superpowers. Unfortunately, Victor Von Doom decides to use his powers for evil, goes after the Fantastic Four, and it's up to them to stop him and save the world. Now, this movie does tease or toy with the dynamics of the group quite nicely. We begin by seeing that obviously Ben and Reed are quite close and are very good friends at the very beginning, so the tie is there. We know that Johnny and Sue are brother and sister, so the tie is always there anyway. But the fact that Johnny and Sue are working for Von Doom and Reed and Ben are on the other side of it does sort of create that nice little parallel, and also with the history between Reed and Sue, which they do keep trying to come back to and try and sort of salvage. It is quite nice to see that, but we also get to see a lot of like playful banter between Johnny and Ben as well. So between the four of them, we do have a very nice dynamic and a very strong link between each individual one with the other three. Victor Von Doom is played by Julian McMahon, the late Julian McMahon, and he does give a quite solid performance, to be fair, as the evil character and the big threat of this movie, albeit fairly cartoonish, but it seems to be in fitting with the tone of this movie. The Fantastic Four do play their parts very well, but I think the standout performer is Chris Evans in his way that he is that rogue, that person that just goes solo and very much likes the limelight, especially in the context of this movie where the four basically get celebrity status thrust upon them without any sort of say in the matter. And Victor's always that person that's separated away from the main group, so he is shown to be much more petty and vindictive, seemingly only choosing to date Susan because of her history with Reed. So the four of them have all come together quite nicely and are sharing that strong bond between all of them, which is in complete contrast to Victor Von Doom, who is completely isolated. And the interesting thing about him is his level of pettiness and vindictiveness against or towards Reed. And it's shown in the best way in his relationship with Susan, sort of indicating that the only reason he's dating her is because of her history with Reed. And almost like having something that Reed can't have anymore. But at the same time, you don't really get that sense of him being the genius that he really is, or him having the sort of intellect to rival Reed and always being in his shadow. None of that is actually ever sort of shown or hinted at, really. And all of these parts of this movie are very good in their delivery. Unfortunately, the movie does then start to go downhill in the fact of we see too many instances of the Fantastic Four fighting each other rather than fighting the actual bad person. It's all very much personal relationships getting in the way, or some fights done for comedic purposes, and it gets too repetitive and it just drags the story to a halt and doesn't really progress it anywhere. But at the same time as well, quite clearly the writers had no idea how to create the face-off between Doom and the Fantastic Four. And it starts off with the idea of Reed trying to turn everybody back to normal, trying to reverse the effects of the accident that caused their powers. So that's what he's working on. And Doom then turns up to tell him, I want you to find a cure for me. So Reed agrees to do that because he's already working on it. And then because Doom goes to a doctor and gets told that his skin's turning into some sort of metal, he then changes his mind. But in order to take out Reed Richards, he decides to take out Ben first by manipulating him into basically turning him against Reed by saying, oh, well, the machine's ready to turn you back normal, but Reed clearly doesn't want to use it because he wants to spend more time with Sue, which Ben is convinced by, even though it's already established that Reed is a very careful person and won't ever sort of go forward with an experiment if there's a downside that he hasn't explored yet, especially when this sort of experiment could result in death or the powers getting stronger if he has a miscalculation. But that's seemingly just thrown out the window in order for the narrative to progress for Ben to go against Reed. Anyway, it's discovered that the experiment would work if Reed had more power. That's something that Doom can supply, so he puts Ben into the capsule willingly. He then grants it more power, powers it up even higher than what Reed could do. Ben turns back normal, and with him out the way, he can go after Reed, which he does. But almost immediately, Ben realises his mistake, and in order to solve that problem, he gets back into the capsule and does the experiment again to get his powers back, which works, even though that the main plot point was that Reed didn't have enough power to be able to create the effects they need. It doesn't really make any sense, does it? But once again, it needs to further that narrative one bit by bit, further and further forward in order to get to this showdown. And that's just what happens. And if you're thinking that clearly either I've become distracted or just lost interest in me giving that final rundown of what happens in the story, it's because I have lost interest and grown very bored whilst watching this film. I very much enjoyed the beginning part of it, and I liked how it didn't waste any time in getting down to the accident in order for them to get their powers, and I quite like the way the powers are slowly introduced and they slowly take effect. It's not an immediate thing. But then it just gets boring. It feels as though they just have absolutely no idea where to go from that point onwards. I feel as though Doom is wasted in this film. We don't really get to see him as the dangerous individual that he can be. And with so much time between the accident and the end of this movie, I feel as though a lot more of the story could have been dedicated to him showing off just how dangerous he is. Whereas in actual fact, what we got was infighting with the Fantastic Four again and again and again and again, which showed their powers again and again and again and didn't really give us anything new. And it ground the story down. But on the plus side, I do like the costume design in this movie, and I do like the way that the characters portray, or the actors portray the characters. Like I say, I mean, Johnny is the standout, but the performance of Michael Chiklis as the Thing, even though that his emotional delivery is quite stunted, just obviously because of the design of his character, he still does give that tragic feel across very well. Reed Richards is shown to be, very intelligent in this movie, but also very socially awkward and almost fully focused in on, he does sort of give off that vibe of being the leader of the group as well, which is, very good to see. Jessica Alba also gives a solid performance as the Invisible Woman throughout this movie. And yeah, I think with the sub storylines in it, the fact of her relationship with Reed sort of being off and on again throughout and then trying to get back together, that is, quite strong. Overall, this movie is quite a fun time, especially when you take into account the humour that's delivered throughout this movie as well, mainly driven by Chris Evans' character and his delivery as Johnny Storm. What I will say is that it does sort of drop off, but it is an origin movie and it does really tick the boxes of what an origin should be. And with having 4 characters in it, each one of them does get a decent amount of screen time to showcase their skills, including the villain in Doctor Doom, albeit at the very end. But because of the uneven storytelling, the narrative conveniences, and the uneven pacing throughout this movie, I am going to give it a 3-star review. So that was my review of Fantastic Four 2005. What did you guys think about it? Have you seen it? Whatever you thought, please pop it in the comment section below. As always, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'll be back again with another Fantastic Four movie. But until then, you guys take it easy and I'll catch you on the next one.